Okay, where's my face? There is my face. No, there we go. Okay. Good evening. This is Wednesday, June 14th, 2023. My name is Douglas Griffin. This is my Wednesday night Bible study. We're in the book of John. If you've never tuned in before, we started in the first chapter of John. We're now in John chapter 18. It's approximately 6 a.m. Uh, 12 hours before Jesus dies on the cross at 6 p.m. Sometime he dies sometime between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Jesus has been taken from the Garden of Gethsemane to appear before Annas and Caiaphas is the high priest. Annas is like his father-in-law, but he's been taken to appear before both of them. John knows what the synoptic gospels have already spoken about this evening. And so he kind of skips it because he said, you already know that story. Let me tell you what you don't know. So although he talks about him going before Annas, he just skips the Caiaphas part, which I'm not going to because he assumes you've read it 40 times. And so when they get to Pilate, which is where John takes up where I'm going to start tonight, you already know what happened with Caiaphas, and so I'm going to go over it. In Matthew chapter 26, verse 57 through 68, he it says, those who laid hold of Jesus led him away to Caiaphas. This is the part that John skips because it's in Matthew, it's in Mark, it's in Luke. And John wrote his book 20 years, 30 years after they did. Those who had laid hold of Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. Annas, who was his father-in-law, who was the previous high priest, Caiaphas, who was the current high priest, basically lived across from each other. So you imagine their balconies, they could shout at each other from across this courtyard around the temple, near the temple. So taken from Annas to Caiaphas is not that you just okay, here we are, right across the parking lot, basically. So he led him the way to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. So they'd all been standing in front of Annas' will, and Annas came out on the balcony and told. Then they went. Now they're waiting for them in front of Caiaphas. But Peter followed him at a distance to the high priest's courtyard, the courtyard in front of his place, and he went in and sat with the servants to see the inn. John is right next to Jesus. John's right there. He's friends with the high priest. His family's very wealthy, big donors to the temple probably. So John has no fear. Peter's frightened. I'm a fisherman from Galilee, and so now the chief priests, the elders, and all the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death. Please somebody come up here and say that Jesus stabbed you. Do something. But found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none who was credible and sound like they made any sense. But at last, two false witnesses came forward and said, this fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days. He said, this temple. He's talking about the temple of his body. He probably pointed to himself. He didn't gesture to the temple. And the high priest arose and said to him, do you answer nothing? What is it these men testify against you? Like, why, you're going to defend yourself? But Jesus kept silent because he knows what's going to happen. So you don't have to always jump in and say, wait a minute, let me tell you. And the high priest answered and said to him, I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. So he didn't answer that accusation. But are you the Son of God? Because I can get you in a charge of blasphemy. So Jesus said to him, it is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. You, specifically, you, Caiaphas, you are going to see the Son of Man. So are you the Son of God? Yes, it is as you said. I'm not going to deny that. But After this, you're going to see the Son of Man, and Ezekiel referred to himself as the Son of Man because Ezekiel was prophesying the destruction of the temple and judgment coming on Jerusalem, which happened 700 years earlier. And he called himself the Son of Man. So he's saying, I'm calling myself the Son of Man because I'm also going to bring judgment on the temple and on Jerusalem and on Israel for your apostasy. So you'll see me, you though, Caiaphas will see me. So either Jesus was hallucinating at this point. Well, I didn't mean you. I meant you 2,000 years from now. You people, you, or he meant you, which is why I'm trying to explain that Jesus was talking about the judgment that was coming on Israel, which happened in 40 years. And everything he said happened 40 years later. Just like the children of Israel were in the wilderness for 40 years, they'd been judged. It took 40 years for the judgment to be complete. At the end of 40 years, only two people remained alive, Joshua and Caleb, who went into the promised land. But when they rejected God, when God came, was on the mountain, and they rejected and built an idol, and God issued his judgment, and 40 years, poop. So in 40 years, the judgment will be complete, and you'll all be wiped out. You'll see me coming on the clouds of heaven to render judgment. Then the high priest tore his clothes, saying, has he spoken blasphemy? He has spoken, not, he wasn't asking. He has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of witnesses? Look, now you have heard his blasphemy. What do you think? Because blasphemy is what you could get people on. They could stone Jesus to death on blasphemy charges. So they answered and said, he is deserving of death. So all the elders of the Sanhedrin, they convicted him. Then they spat in his face and beat him, and others struck him with the palms of their hands, saying, prophesy to us, Christ. Who is the one who struck you? If you're a prophet, who just struck you? Like he couldn't say you like that. Oh, you must be a prophet. But Jesus knows all this is going to happen. He's prepared. He's been preparing since he was born. Now, the Sanhedrin condemned him to death, but the Romans are the ones who had to carry out the sentence. And this is where John starts. So he skips all this stuff with Caiaphas because he knows you already know it, that he was accused of blasphemy there. So they take him to Pilate. And that's where I'm starting out in John chapter 18, verse 28, because their power to carry out capital punishment, to sentence someone to death. Now, they could go crazy and kill somebody, but to sit as a council and do the death penalty, Rome had taken that power away from them. So they had to send him to Pilate if they wanted to get a sentence of death. Okay. So don't forget, Peter denied him 3 times, has already denied him 3 times, and then the cock crowed. So this is sometime between 3 and 6 o'clock that they take him. They're not instantly at Pilate. So the cock crowed. All this stuff happened with Caiaphas. They take him with Pilate, so it's probably closer to 6 now. So it says they take him, so they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the praetorium, and it was early morning, like I said, probably about 6 o'clock. It says, but they themselves did not go into the praetorium, lest they should be defiled. Why? Because it's the preparation day for Passover. It's the day before Passover, and during that whole week, there's a whole list of things they're supposed to do. One of them is to get rid of all the leaven in your house. You had to get rid of all the leaven, sweep it out. They knew that Gentiles probably had leaven because they take him to where Pilate lives. Now he would come out and offer judgments and then go back into his apartment where he lived. So we can't go in there. He's probably got some leavened bread in there, and then we'll be defiled for Passover. What are we going to do? In Numbers chapter 9, the second year they had been in the wilderness, the first year in Egypt, everybody did what God said. They got rid of the leaven. They did everything. They killed the lambs. They put the blood, etc. And the death angel passed over them. Their second year, they're in the wilderness carrying out. And it's a little more difficult because they don't have houses. They're in tents. So, and they're running into unexpected things. But they still want to be totally clean for Passover. In Numbers chapter 9, verse 4, it says, so Moses told the children of Israel that they should keep the Passover. Yes, it's our second year here, first year in the wilderness. We're going to keep the Passover. And they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the first month at twilight. in the wilderness of Sinai. So that's when the Passover happens, on the 14th. According to all that the Lord commanded Moses. So the children of Israel did. Now there were certain men who were defiled by human corpse. Now that was one of the things that could defile you, that you had to go to the temple and get cleansing for and all that stuff. If you touched a human corpse, in those days, people usually died of some disease. So then they didn't know why. So don't touch human corpses. Don't touch them. Not because they're nasty, anything like that, because you just don't know what the person died of. You don't want to carry that disease back to your house. So there was a whole special ritual they had to go through in order to deal with the corpse. But just the regular person, if you just happen on a corpse and now, when somebody would die because they were afraid to touch the corpse, because sometimes they took the law to the most literal degree that they could, they would just leave it sitting out. You'd find corpses just sitting out. The person would just drop dead and they go, oh, don't touch him. And so you could just be walking along and stumble over a corpse, which is what they're implying that happened to these people. And so there were certain men who were defiled by a human corpse so that they could not keep the Passover on that day. And they came before Aaron and Moses that day and said, what are we going to do? Right? So you can get, it's like, oh man, I almost made it right to the Passover and then I got defiled. And what am I going to do? So the last thing they wanted to do was go into the Praetorium where this Gentile lived, where this Roman lived, because who knows what unkosher things he had done. So they waited outside. So Jesus is by himself with Pilate. None of the rest of them heard what Pilate said to Jesus. So if you won't find it in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, John went in. John stuck by Jesus. He was the one at the cross. He's the only disciple literally at the cross. The rest of them are watching from a distance and scared to death. Oh, they crucified him. But John's sitting right there with Jesus' mother. So John, for some reason, had this. Well, I think he just believed Jesus. When Jesus said certain things, don't be afraid, he just believed him. That's why he really loved John. He loved Peter for a different reason, because Peter was bold and Peter was going to jump into things. And he knew that Peter would be the first one to speak out. John was not a great public speaker. So you can love God and you're not a great public speaker. Doesn't mean you like God any less than that person who mouths off all the time. You love Jesus just the same. So John, he goes in, he hears all of this. No one else heard this. Okay, so they themselves did not go into the Praetorium lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Now, the majority of the Christian church today believes that Jesus was crucified on Passover and then the next night was the next day. But John's saying no, he was crucified the day before, on the preparation day, on the day that they are supposed to be investigating the lambs and check the lambs are in the temple and they're looking to make sure they're without spot and they're blemish free. That's the preparation day. That's the 13th. And then on the 14th, which begins at sundown, that's when they have the Passover meal. So Jesus was crucified on the 13th, and then on the 14th is when they eat the meal. For some reason, most people want to put that we're a day off. Well, because they believe Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Matthew was there. Mark and Luke were not. Mark and Luke heard the accounts, wrote it all down like a great biographer, but just got that one thing incorrect. They wanted that Last Supper that Jesus had to have been a Passover supper. That's what they wanted it to be, but John's very clear it was not. It was just a regular supper where he demonstrated what the Passover would be. He explained, tomorrow when you have this, this is what it all means. But I'm going to be the lamb. You're going to eat the lamb, but I'm the lamb. Okay. So in John chapter 13, verse 1, he says, now before the feast of Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come, that he should depart from this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end and had supper with them. And it says, and supper being ended, the devil entered into the heart of Judas Iscariot. So he's saying clearly, this is before the feast. I know in Matthew, Mark, and Luke have said for 20, 30 years, but they're just one day off. It's not a big deal. But John was there. John remembers it all clearly because John was the only one who was level-headed. They're all panicked and out of their minds. Later, when you ask them when it happened and what, they were fuzzy on those details. They scattered. John did not. In John chapter 13, verse 27, it says, now after the piece of bread, at this normal, regular meal that Jesus explained the Passover, now after the piece of bread, Satan entered into Judas. That's because Jesus turned to Judas and said, this is my body broken for you, which made him crazy because Judas's mind, you're not about to go to the cross. He understood what Jesus meant by broken for you. This is my, I was like, no, we're about to have a revolution and I'm going to force your hand. I'm going to turn you in and the Roman soldiers are going to come and get you. And then finally you'll show all your great power. And so I'm betraying you on purpose to force your hand. And so he went crazy. He didn't want to hear this. This is my body broken for you. Because it's after piece of bread. After piece of bread, Satan entered to him. Jesus said to him, well, what you do quickly, because clearly you're crazy. But no one at the table knew for what reason he had said this to him. For some thought, like, what do you mean do quickly? Because Jesus had the money box and Jesus had said to him, buy those things we need for the feast tomorrow, the feast day. Tomorrow's the feast day. Or that he should give something to the poor. And John's just making more, he's putting these little things in so that you'll be aware. I'm telling you, this all happened the day before Passover. Jesus died the day before Passover. And then he literally, he hung on the cross the day before Passover. And he died right at sundown. It was perfect and became the Passover lamb. Okay. For some thought, because Jesus had the money box, Jesus said to him, buy those things we need for the feast tomorrow. Judas had the money box because Judas had the money. What did I say? Jesus had the money box. Bless my heart. Because Judas had the money box that Jesus had said to him, buy those things we need for the feast. Or that he should give some to the poor. Like when he says, go do quickly, they couldn't figure out, do what quickly? Because we have not been paying attention. Having received the piece of bread, he then went out immediately and it was night. So Judas left. Nobody knew why. Because they had not been paying attention. John chapter 19, verse 14. We haven't gotten there yet, but this is just John laying his case. He says, now it was the preparation day of the Passover. And about the 6th hour, Jesus is on the cross and he says to the Jews, behold your king. Okay. So he's saying, see, that's all in the preparation day. He didn't die on Passover. You're one day off. He didn't die on the Friday. On the Thursday, but not on the Friday. Okay. Therefore, because it was the preparation day, this is John 19:31, because it was the preparation day, that the body should not remain on the cross on the Sabbath. He says that's why they went to him. That's why they went to Pilate and said, can we take his body down? Because it was preparation day. He died right at sundown, boom. He hung on the cross all preparation day, died. And so like, can we take him down? Because now it's actually Passover and his body can't hang on the cross on Passover. So therefore, because it was preparation day and about to be Passover, that the body should not remain on the cross on that Sabbath, on that holy day. For that Sabbath was a high day. It was Passover. And the Jews asked Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. We got to take all these people off the cross, please. But they didn't have to break Jesus' legs. He was already dead. He had died on the preparation day, and then now it was about to be Passover. He can't hang on the cross on Passover. Also, so, John 18, verse 29. So they bring him to Pilate. They won't come inside. We can't go in there. So Pilate goes out to them. It says, Pilate then went out to them and said, what accusation do you bring against this man? Because they simply just brought a man into Pilate and said, condemn him to death. What they couldn't say is, he called himself the Son of God. because Pilate would say, "Get out of here with that. I'm not. That's your business. I don't." He called himself the Son of God, and I'm supposed to condemn him to death for that. Get out of here. But they needed, so they didn't say, they wouldn't say why they had brought him there because they knew their claim would sound goofy to Pilate, and he would just dismiss the whole case. Can't dismiss that case. John 18:30. So they answered and said to him, if he were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him up to you. Like, so he just trust us. He must have done something bad, or we would not have brought him to you. So just condemn him to death, but we won't tell you what the charges were. We won't lay it out in any sort of affidavit. Here's what he's charged with. Nope, not gonna tell you. Just condemn him. Okay, I'm not gonna do that. John 18:31. Then Pilate said to them, you take him and judge him according to your law. Because if you won't tell me what he's accused of, I'm not gonna die. Sorry. So you take him. Now, therefore the Jews said to him, it is not lawful for us to put anyone to death. You know that. And they didn't want to admit it because they were embarrassed that Rome had taken that away from them. Because there's a lot of people they wanted to put to death. So let's understand, they could not legally, they couldn't do it. They could passionately go crazy and just kill somebody. If a mob just killed somebody, they go, oh, well. But they couldn't bring someone in and try them and sentence them to death. In John chapter 8, verse 59, and again, blasphemy is the only thing that they could get you for. But even then, they couldn't really legally pass a death sentence on you. But in the law, it said we can stone you to death for blasphemy. So they were at a conundrum. The law said, our Torah says we can do it, but the Roman says we can't. So John chapter 8, verse 59, Jesus says to them, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. So they said to him, you were not yet 50 years old, and you've seen Abraham? What do you mean, your father Abraham? Rejoiced to see your day. You do know that he lived 1,200 years ago, maybe 1,600 years ago. Hello? So how did he rejoice to see your day? So verse 58, John chapter 8, verse 58, Jesus said to them, most assuredly I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. Which made him go crazy because only God can say those words. So then they took up stones to throw at him because you can kill someone for blasphemy. But Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. Now, let's explain this. So they're in the temple and they're right outside the Holy of Holies, and a lot of people are gathered there. There were not a bunch of stones there. They had to go outside and gather some stones and come back, as though Jesus was going to just stand there while they go out and get stones. So when they went out to get stones, because it wasn't his time, he just mixed himself with the crowd and went on out. I'm not going to stand here while you look for stones to kill me, because it's not time. Sorry, you will be. But later, I know you're going to put me to death, but this is not the time. So he went through the midst of them and so passed by, like they didn't even recognize Jesus once he mixed in with the crowd, went on out. They came in with stones. Where is he? Where is he? And they were walking right by him, didn't see him. In John chapter 10, verse 30, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees again, and he tells them, I and my Father are one. Then the Jews took up stones again to stone him because, oh my God, this is blasphemy. This time we're looking right at you. We got the stones right here with us. But Jesus answered them and said, many good works I have shown you from my Father. For which of those works do you stone me? And the Jews answered him, saying, for good work we do not stone you, but for blasphemy, because you know we can get you for blasphemy. And because you, being a man, make yourself God. But it didn't happen then. So they still couldn't get Jesus, because Jesus already knew when it was supposed to happen. This is how they got Stephen, though. So 3.5 years after Jesus, exactly 3.5 years, Stephen is preaching them in Jerusalem. And he's getting them for what they did. In Acts chapter 7, verse 51, it says, you stiff-necked and uncircumcised in heart. which is killing them. How dare you call us uncircumcised, even though you're saying uncircumcised in heart? How dare you?
I'll
you
show you.
you always resist the Holy Spirit as your fathers did, so do you. What? You're trying to accuse us? It says, which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? Because you realize, which is just because they're horrified at what those earlier people did, and they killed this prophet and that prophet, and I can't believe it. We're nothing like them. Oh, really? Because you just sent Jesus to the cross. So you are sons of those horrible people. So it says, they killed those who foretold the coming of the just one, of whom you now have become the betrayers and murderers. So they killed them for prophesying about the Messiah. You just murdered him. Verse 56 of Acts chapter 7, he says, so they're screaming, we're going to have to kill him. They're taking him stones. Stephen just stands there because he already knew that he's going to have to be martyred. He says, I see the heavens open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. Now, that's specific. He's standing. David said, my Lord said to the Lord, sit down at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. I'm going to send judgment on them right now. So David saw a day when the Messiah would then sit down, where God would say, sit down, because he was standing, right? So that's why they're like, oh my goodness, I see him standing. I'm looking at him, he's standing. I think God's about to tell him, send judgment, right? And so this is the end of that 3.5 year period. So Jesus prophesied for 3.5 years. His ministry is 3.5 years. 3.5 years later, Stephen is martyred. And from then on, the disciples are driven out of Jerusalem. That's a 7-year period. That's that last 7-year period. They're driven out of Jerusalem. And at that point, judgment starts coming on Jerusalem till finally in 70 AD, it's destroyed. And Jesus told them, you standing here will not rest until you see the Son of Man coming in glory, in the clouds. You'll see me. So not only am I the Son of God, but you're going to see me coming to get you. Okay. So then they cried out, going back to Stephen, then they cried out with a loud voice and stopped their ears, and they ran at him with one accord, and they cast him out of the city and stoned him. Even though they didn't have the right to kill people, they didn't have the right to sentence them to death. If they went crazy and killed somebody, then they were cool with that. But you can't bring somebody in all calm and put them up on charges and then sentence them to death. You have no power to do that. But it's like, hey, the crowd went crazy and they stoned them to death. Oops, what can we do? They went crazy. And the witnesses laid down their clothes at the feet of a young man named Saul. And you know that Saul on the road to Damascus becomes Paul, and this whole ministry to the Gentiles begins. So God is turning his back at this point on those Jews who disbelieved, not on all Jews, and they're still his chosen people, and there are plenty of Jews who believed, but these particular ones who persecuted Jesus, there are no other Jews that are alive today in the past 2,000 years who persecuted Jesus. The ones who persecuted Jesus are dead, so there's no reason to ever go after any Jews ever. Just this particular group in Jerusalem who persecuted Jesus, judgment came on those. Okay. And they stoned Stephen as he was calling on God and saying, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. So, it says the Jews said to him, going back to Pilate, Jews said to Pilate, it is not lawful for us to put anyone to death, because they couldn't do it. They wanted to stone Jesus a couple of times. They couldn't do it. Plus, this wasn't lawful. They just could not do it. They went crazy and killed Stephen. But other than that, they weren't allowed to. So please, Pilate, just pass a sentence of death on this guy. John hears this is not recorded in the other Gospels because John's there. So he's saying that they did this, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, of which he spoke, signifying what death he would die. Because Jesus had said in John 3:14, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up. So just the way that he put that serpent on a pole, I've got to be put on a pole just that same way. And everyone who looked to the serpent lived. Everyone who looks to me will live. Just like that serpent represented their sin, I will now take on your sins. So I'm going to be crucified in that same way, which was not a, Jews didn't have crucifixion. So they're saying, what are you talking about? Well, Jesus knew what he was talking about because the Romans were going to be eventually sentence him to death. That's what Pilate eventually is going to do, but he's going to have to be talked into it. So he says, lift it up. In John chapter 12, verse 30, Jesus answers and says, when they hear a voice, this is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased. He says, this voice did not come because of me, but for your sake. I know who I am. God's not trying to help me out. He's trying to let you know who I am. He says, so now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world must be cast out. Excuse me. So he's basically saying the devil's stupid because I'm about to go to the cross. And that's the last thing that he should want. But he doesn't understand how these things work. He's trying to get rid of me. Oh, I'll put into Judas's heart to betray you and put you on the cross. That'll get you. Yeah. Oh, don't do that. So he says, now the judgment is coming. Now the ruler of the world is going to be cast out. And if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. And I know we have all these songs about lift him up, but he's talking about, and it's fine that because we should praise him and lift him up, but that's not what Jesus was talking about. He was talking about crucifixion. If I be crucified, that will draw all men, Jews, Gentiles, all men to me. And this he said, signifying by what death he should die. That's John in John verse 12, who's getting it. I get it now. When Jesus said all this stuff, he's telling us how he's going to die. I'm going to die by crucifixion. But again, at the time, they didn't, we Jews don't crucify people. So how's that going to happen? In Matthew chapter 20, verse 18, he's very specific. Verse 18 and 19 says, behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and to the scribes, and they will condemn him to death, which they did, and deliver him to the Gentiles, to mock and to scourge and to crucify. And the third day he will rise again. So he's very specific. They're going to condemn me to death. They're going to deliver me to Pilate, to the Gentiles, to the Romans. They'll mock me, whip me, and crucify me. So, but again, the disciples went, no, that's not going to happen. I'm glad we got that out of your head. So then Pilate, now back to John. So they admit to Pilate, we can't really condemn anybody to death. Then Pilate entered the praetorium again and called Jesus. Because they're saying, please, Pilate, just condemn him to death. We can't tell you why. Just trust us. He's bad. He's a bad man. So Pilate entered the praetorium again and called Jesus and said to him, are you the king of the Jews? Now, I'm just saying this is interesting. John's the only one in there. He's, quote unquote, breaking the law. But they just feared that there was unleavened bread in there. I'm sure there wasn't. But maybe there was. John didn't care. I'm going to break the law. It's okay because Jesus is about to die for my sin in about 6 hours. So John's in there. Jesus is in there. And Pilate, nobody else. And obviously some of his security guards are there. Are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus answered him, are you speaking for yourself about this? Or did others tell you this concerning me? And he's wanting to know, if you're asking, am I king, like a king, earthly king, like how you would see it, then the answer is no. If the Jews told you I was king of the Jews, then yes, I am their king, but I'm not an earthly king. So so Pilate says to him, am I a Jew? Like, I don't get all the intricacies. He says, your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done? Because they won't tell me, and I'm supposed to sentence you, and I really don't want to. I have a bad feeling about it. Verse 36, Jesus answered and said, my kingdom is not of this world. If you're wanting to know if I'm a traitor, because that's ultimately what he got him on. You're claiming that you're going to overthrow my kingdom, which is what Judas and all the zealots wanted him to do. And that's why he's saying, I'm not trying to overthrow earthly kingdoms. I have another kingdom that I'm going to build in people's hearts. I'm not trying to take over secular governments. They're corrupt. I'm trying to build a perfect kingdom in people's hearts. So my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here. So Pilate says to him, well, so are you a king then? That's what you're saying, you're king. I'm just trying to get, are you a king and you're about to attack me? So Jesus answered and said, you say rightly that I am a king. For this cause I was born, for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who's of the truth hears my voice. So yes, I am a king. I should have a king in this world. Are you a king? Yes, yes. And that's why I was born, that I should bear witness of the truth. And I'm witnessing to you right now, because I want you to say, what's the truth? And I'll tell you, well, you're a sinner. And then, so Pilate said to him, what is truth? And when he said this, he went out to the Jews. He didn't wait for an answer. Oh, do you bear witness of the truth? So, what is truth? You saying what truth is? Jesus is like, tell me what the truth. Nah. So he goes back out to the Jews, and he says to them, I find no fault in him at all. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to come up with something better than just suspect he's evil, because I got a bad feeling about this. But, because I'm trying to wiggle out of this, you have a custom that I should release someone to you at the Passover, which is like some old custom. So do you therefore want me to release to you the king of the Jews? And they said, no, not this man Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber. We would rather have a thief let go than the Son of God. So they started off afraid to sin. We don't want to go inside the praetorium where Pilate is, because we certainly don't want to do anything wrong on the Sabbath, although we are crucifying the King of the universe on the Sabbath. But that's not the problem for us. The problem is we might touch some unleavened bread. So they're completely misjudging who Jesus is. Hey, would you want to set him free because he is the King of the Jews? No, we'd rather have that thief. Okay. Suit yourself. I'm trying to get you out of this, and because I have a bad feeling about this. Okay, so I'm going to stop there, and we'll go on with chapter 19. Again, John is hearing these private conversations, and even between the Sanhedrin and Pilate, John is there. The rest of the disciples, Peter didn't go. I mean, but John's right in the middle of it. So he's giving on purpose. He's giving us this insight into what was going on. Okay, so thank you again for listening. We will continue these last. It's 6 in the morning. Well, right now it's about noon. Chapter 19 takes place at noon. So between 6 and noon in the morning, Jesus is about to, by 6 o'clock that evening, he'll be on the cross and dead. But John's like, I'm recording every bit of this because it's fascinating. Okay, so thank you. On Sundays, we're in Exodus, where God is giving this law that these Pharisees are trying so hard not to break, not realizing, well, you're crucifying the person who gave the law, so that's going to leave a mark. All right, thank you so much, and I'll see some of you Sunday. Others, I'll see you next week. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.